Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you here. This session is being hosted by OFMA, the Oregon Farmers Markets Association. We support farmers markets across the state with training, advocacy, and promotion. And we have lots of online events, including workshops and webinars and peer circles for market staff across the state to have time to meet with each other and talk shop. And over on our event fence website and listings, you can see more of what we have. I've just put some links in there so you can check out what else we have going on. So today's session is part of our market showcase. Each episode of our showcase will feature a market talking about a challenge they had and what they did to help solve it. They'll tell their story, and then the space is open for Q&A for any other market to share knowledge gained from your experience on today's topic. And we hope that this can be a space to talk candidly with peers about how to innovate our markets. And just a couple things about how our sessions work and sharing discussion time with each other, because we hope you'll be comfortable here in our online world. Feel free to be off camera if that helps you attend. And also, this is definitely a participatory space. Sorry, I just lost my notes there for a second. Okay, definitely participatory here. We want you to ask questions and share what you know. You can talk out loud or put comments and questions and affirmations in the chat. But do remember to listen as well. In fact, if you tend to find yourself in the place of talking for a while, maybe try asking another person to share and open up the space to others instead. So thanks for all your introductions in the chat. It's good to see who's here. And Rebecca, I'll hand things over to you to get started.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Landis. I've been market director of Corvallis Albany Farmers Markets since 1995. And that means that my experience is probably very different than that of most market staff. And I don't want you to feel that I'm telling you that you should do what I do. We are trying to look at this more broadly in terms of what actually happens in the markets we have here in Oregon. Excuse me a second. I see I've done one thing where I can't see all my slide. Okay, I got to hide the thumbnail so I can see that. All right, I'm good now. So this transition is going to happen to all sorts of markets. A very common situation we have is that many of our markets have very limited resources, and that in itself is going to lead to some turnover. And often boards have to sort of catch the ball that's been thrown up in the air. And sometimes they're able to hand off quickly to a new manager. Sometimes it's the board that's in this position rather than a new employee. So all of these things can happen. The largest market organizations have maybe a little less of a problem with transition, or less of a challenge, shall we say, with transition, because they may have multiple staff that can pick up the load. But there's a lot of markets that are in between those two extremes, and they don't have, they may have some complicated systems and still not that many employees to do these things. So some of the scenarios might be where this discussion can be valuable is when you have a market manager who knows that they are leaving and there's time to onboard the next person. That's great, but it often isn't the case. Sometimes the market manager is already left and the board is in the position of onboarding. And I want to apologize that the word onboard, I don't want, Amanda and I were talking about this. I don't want to make this sound like a corporate human resource sort of thing. We're really talking about just the process of transitioning. And there are going to be situations where a market manager has a health issue or a family member with a health issue and needs to take a leave of absence. So it could be a temporary situation, but it's still, if it's in the season, it still requires transition effort. And the emergency that occurs may not be of a known duration. And so You don't, you have to scramble and you have to cover that, and you don't necessarily know how long the person will be gone, but you have markets going. So, this is not exactly a menu of what we're going to cover today, but just a little bit of a preview. Some things that I am going to recommend are that you do a do-it-yourself assessment of where you are if you needed a transition, and not do it in a way that stresses yourself out. That's going to be, that's going to be a risk when you talk about something that feels like it's going to be difficult. You can sometimes get very stressed out by that, and that's really the opposite of our intention with this presentation. Amanda has helped me gather some valuable resources that I think will help all of us at regardless of the size of the market stage. And also, we do have, when we get down to details of particular things that we want to look into, we do have some experts that we can engage to dive deeper on some topics if it's appropriate for you. So the DIY assessment I'm talking about is just really looking at what you have. Do you have any documentation? Perhaps you got someone you came, perhaps you have documented some things so you could go on vacation and hand off. And there are always going to be holes in whatever you have. They're going to be things that are covered by it. And so you want to be, I think the process of doing this is best served by looking at what are the biggest omissions in what you have that you might want to work on. Are there some lesser things that could use improvement? Maybe they're not as serious. Is there something that you can do now before you have vacancy that would be possible to do in your workload and still create some security for the future? Amanda reminded me that that because of all these different scenarios, sometimes often you're not going to know, and it may not actually be possible to fill all of these self-assessed deficits. You may simply, the best you can do might be to note these things as tasks that the board of directors, if there is one, or the next manager may want to address. And of course, they will have the choice to set their own priorities at that time. But you can do it by just saying to whoever you're handing off to what you think still needs to be done that would be helpful. So in the case of my market association, Corvallis Albany Farmers Markets, what I've identified as perhaps my biggest gap is that we could use an employee handbook. I am hopeful, because I have a longer transition, that I will be able to actually draft such a thing and start working on that with my board. We've survived for decades without such a thing, but this is a gap that I would like to try to fill. And on the other hand, financial processes, which is something that I was also not happy with the lack of documentation. That was pretty easy for me to just brain dump, and then I'll be able to refine that a little bit. Whereas an employee handbook, I'm going to be calling on other organizations to help me fill that gap, or at least start to fill that gap. But again, those are CAFM's choices. You do not have to have the same priorities that we do. Those are just the things that in my case I found were lacking, that I think I can address or begin to address. So everyone has these things on this slide. We all have online accounts that have passwords, maybe your own website that you manage. Excuse me, I'm sorry, got off track here. the list of passwords that I personally have, I'm really embarrassed to say, is totally commingled with passwords for my personal stuff. So I'm going to want to separate that and just have a clean document that shows what passwords and programs use that they will need access to. And as many contacts as you can give someone, that's a good thing. Contacts with, say, the city, that if you have a city-owned site, or your landlord if you have a private site, all of your social service partners that you work with, all of the providers of services like porta potties and things like that. There's, the list can go on, and just say start one and just keep adding to it. And, physical keys to sheds, vehicles, bathrooms, that sort of thing. And a list of things that have an annual renewal would be, and when and how that's done. So if you're an entity in the state of Oregon, for example, you have you probably have some form of corporation, a nonprofit corporation, and you have to renew that annually. Maybe you have assumed business names as well, and those things all have schedules and methods to renew. The software referred to above with passwords, I mean, some of that you have to pay for on an annual basis. Some of that you might be paying up for on a monthly basis. The person who takes over for you is not going to know all that stuff unless you put that down. Some of the markets in Oregon have membership and some are not, but I think the majority of markets have a structure that they might have some kind of a bylaws and articles of incorporation that should go in your packet. If they're board to be elected, bylaws will be your guideline on how that's done and when that's done and so forth. A lot of us have at least one grant with the farmers market if we're doing SNAP and double up, and you may have many grants, and a number of Oregon markets have quite a few sponsorships. So back under the contacts, that'll be one of the key areas that you would want to document. And getting back again to SNAP and double up, those of you that are doing that know that you have a box of equipment, you have many records, and you have the current. And so those are all just the beginning of what people would need access to there. So this is just a list to get you thinking about what would go into your transition document or packet. It's nowhere near complete. We have some help. We have some help finding things to look at to decide whether they apply to our market. Amanda helped me with this piece of it. So 3 that I think she's going to put them in the chat. Have you done, are you putting those in the chat now? Okay. Yes, so she's already got at least, yeah, she's got a Google page up here. All right. So the first one was compiled by the Kelly Crane, excuse me, the executive director of OFMA, to help OFMA with her transition. And Amanda got permission from the executive director of the Washington State Farmers Market Association for this document, which is very extensive. Maybe it's more extensive than you need, but I think it'd be a great place to go shopping for ideas about what would go in. And then MIFA is Michigan, and they have a toolkit as well for creating a binder for this kind of thing. And okay, and as you can see, the slide has the OFMA materials on it. And I'm going to move. Okay, that's where I was. Sorry. All right. So I had to have a don't panic slide because that's exactly what I did. And I don't want that to happen to you. When you do get overwhelmed, it stops your progress. And I tried to do everything all at once. I had not yet seen the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, but I created that for myself. And I would say that if you take this in a more measured way, that won't happen to you. Go to the experts after you have figured out what you want to do. And I think you'll be more comfortable with the process than I was. I went to the expert and got an overwhelming list of things that I got a list of everything that any nonprofit has done in the history of mankind, and helped me. That didn't help me. It helped me have a freak out, and that's not a productive thing to have when you're doing this. You need to just have the freedom to think about this in the way that fits your market and not worry about what everyone else in the universe is doing. So I think that's enough for an initial run through, and we'll take questions, and Amanda may have more resources. I'm sorry, I haven't looked in the chat to see if we posted oh, is it all just in that one Google document?
Yeah, if you go to that folder, they're all in there.
Okay.
There's a link to each one.
All right.
Yeah, so this time is open now for people to ask questions, and we're such a small group. You are welcome to come off mic and just ask. Or share, if you want to share examples of how things went for you in the past, or something that you might be preparing for. So you don't have to have a question. You can also just help other people get through this process if this is something that they're trying to do. We'd love to hear what you've done. Alexis, it looks like you want to talk, but
I was hoping nobody was looking at my screen. I trying to formulate my question. My question is around the handoff of a computer, or like the craziness that is like all the documents you've just compiled in your computer for years and years and years, and what to do with that.
So you have a owned computer, is what?
Say that again.
Your computer is owned by your market, or your computer is owned by you, but it has all your market stuff that you want to get off of it?
No, it would be a market-owned computer with all market stuff. And I feel like when I came onto this role, a lot of documents are already there and have just been searching. Like I just search for documents randomly and hope to find them. But there was never an organization that was explained to me, or I mean, everything's just there. So I'm wondering if anybody has any tips on how to make sense of your computer to somebody else.
Well, one thought is, and I know your organization does this, Google Docs. Maybe you instituted that after you got the computer with everything.
No, right now we are using a lot of Google Docs right now, especially with the board. That's mainly the place where we deposit all the documents that we want the board and staff to have access to. But I would say for my everyday today, just like work life, I use a combination of Google Docs and documents on my computer.
Me too. I think the difficulty, I actually have been Googling the question of what sort of add-on program I could put on a Mac to improve the infamously bad Finders program.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I am a Mac user, but I do think that the Windows operating system actually has a better way to access files. I think that that my Mac hides files from me just to be mean. And so one thing that is a personal failing on my part is I'm not always perfect about file naming conventions. The better you can be about consistently naming the same file, and I'm talking about recurring things.
Mm-hmm.
but it just ends up being a circular mess because I go looking for the old one to see what it's called, and then I've spent 15 minutes there trying to find the file name, and sometimes I give up. But a good folder structure obviously is part of the hygiene of that. But I just find it hard to have a lot of interlocking folders in the Mac operating system. And also I frankly struggle with the organization of my Google Drive. Because it doesn't allow you to easily look at the hierarchy. You kind of have to fight it to look at the hierarchy of the files. So those are the things that I would like to improve about my own practice. And I'm not sure. I think it's good that you have a laptop though, that a handed off laptop. Think about the situation a lot of markets are in, which is that the market doesn't own any laptop. And you're reliant on the employee choosing to document and transfer files. Actually, I have to admit, I do own this current laptop. The last one was owned by the market. And so that will be part of my transition process, trying to get things into folders and up on the Google Drive. And then I will still own this. That has to be, that has to be sort of weighed. I guess I was concerned with the cost of the computer that I wanted and wanting to not have the market do that. But overall, it's probably better to do what happened with Lane County. Even though it's been, I fully recognize what you're saying about the difficulty of taking someone else's organizational system and figuring out where the heck everything is. Does anybody else have some better thoughts on how you can use the tools I've mentioned, or other tools to provide an organization of files that it will be easier for the next person to glom onto and start running with? I tend to organize
Everybody here really good at that file hygiene stuff? Are you one of those people who is able to consistently name your files, or do you sort of have this sneaking dread too that when you leave, you're going to have a bunch to clean up for the next person?
I have a big dread about that. I mean, our board doesn't, I mean, I could put stuff into Google Docs, but they don't know how to find it. Some don't use computers very well at all. I could put them on a flash drive, I suppose, but and then who controls that? These are big issues because I see it looming in my future, but a lot of food for thought here. I'm gonna
have
to discuss.
That's not the point of this, not to scare, but to just, the longer you have to think about it, the more you can sort of incorporate it in what you're doing anyway. Oh, I should throw out, like, I'm 65, so I've been thinking about this for a while. Things that I've already kind of dealt with is, and that the one thing I've dealt with, I don't think necessarily everyone has this problem. I had a personal email that had become the market's email because I've been doing it so long that email was kind of almost a new thing back then. I mean, markets, when I started, there was no such thing as Gmail. You didn't just start a Gmail account for the market like you would today when you're starting a market. We have transitioned to Google Workspaces. So we have a place to create and kill emails, and it's linked to our webpage. This is probably what a lot of you that middle-sized and large markets already do. But small markets, I think, largely just regular Gmail, and hopefully the password for that Gmail will be passed along, and then the next person will have access to everything in that Gmail queue. And that would include the documents on the drive that go with that Gmail. So that's one thing that's relatively easy to pass along if you think ahead about it.
Yeah, getting the same inbox that the market manager before me had used was super helpful for seeing vendor history and previous vendor conversations and what she had been telling. You know, when a vendor came to me and said, "This is what we agreed," it was really nice to be able to go look in the search through the Gmail account and be like, "Is that what they agreed? Like, what was she telling vendors in the past?" So having, and it's less for the public not having to know, oh, okay, it's not Gretchen anymore, it's Amanda now that I need to contact for the market manager. Just being able to contact manager all the time and having that never change for vendors and everyone else is really helpful. I don't want to lose Lucinda's question that was in the chat. She asked about how much board involvement do you have, or do you expect to have with passing on this information?
Well, I have a board that has good feelings and good thoughts about this, but I think I'm going to have to reserve their time for the very most pressing parts of this, the biggest policy issues about my leaving, and the details I think are going to be on me. If any big changes that need to be made have to be a board decision and not my decision. I don't want to make any big moves that foreclose anything for them. But I'm bringing up, like, the structure of how they hire in the future. Maybe they're going to split up my job. Maybe we want to do something like Hillsdale, for example, or Lane County. One of those are among the models that we could choose to change how CAFM allocates its staff dollars.
Talking about like a co-managership that's what you're pointing out with those markets. Yeah.
That could be a thing. I do all the bookkeeping too, and that's an odd thing. I don't know exactly how that's done in all the other markets, but I would suspect that most of the market managers aren't doing as much bookkeeping as I am. And, perhaps we need a bookkeeper position or a contractor. I'm worried about the cost of that. But, those I think are board decisions, because, if they have fiscal implications, as any staffing thing does, that's not something that I have the right to tell, to tell them what to do. I can only tell them what their choices are. So let's see. Rachel's got a comment, a file map that shows all the main folders and subfolders.
So Rachel, how often are you updating that on a regular basis to have it ready to pass off? Is that something you do right before you leave somewhere, or are you just keeping that up to date all the time?
I created one for our board to help them navigate the drives when I was at William Farm and Food Coalition. But yeah, I think that is the hard part of keeping it updated, is revisiting it maybe on an annual basis to check and see what else have moved around. I also am a big fan of kind of archiving files as you go, so every main folder I have in my Google Drive has a year subfolder under it, and then I archive anything that's longer than the last 2 years.
Kind of breaking up, Rachel.
To keep things a little bit clearer, just kind of archive whatever is older than 2 years usually.
Because you're typically referring back to the prior year, and not much further back than that on a regular basis.
Right. Yeah.
I think the trick is going to be like, how do we pick out the particular trees that we want someone to be able to find? Because, before I write a difficult email, I pull out some kind of a text document and write what I'm going to say in that email. That may or may not be important for anyone to ever see again, but I will not throw it out. I can't. Amanda's comment about emails with vendors. I mean, I would actually want to keep, if you have a difficult vendor, maybe somebody you're afraid is going to even threaten legal action or something like that. If you have, and maybe you talk to them only on text, those are the times when I want to throw all text into a document and have them and keep them, because it's, your phone may or may not, you see those texts again a year later. So I'm a bit of a hoarder of data information, and that's a problem because I've created this forest of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's important with this process to acknowledge too, there's a lot of emotions involved. I mean, you're leaving a job, and you can be leaving that job for so many varieties of reasons that are emotional, and it can be, on the flip side of it, once you've passed the information on, to see the next person not using the information that you provided for them, or making different decisions with the information that you gave them. And I think this whole transition process is a whole experience of letting go of what you do not have control over, which sometimes, that why you are leaving a job, maybe it's good for you to not have so much control over something. Maybe you need to leave and be doing something different, but
so the best case scenario is move across the country and do something entirely different. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a vendor in the market. So that's a danger. That's another thing that the board's going to have to consider when trying to figure out what my ongoing role might be, that my husband is a vendor in this market, and I will be around. But yeah, I'm going to have to focus on having some emotional separation so that can happen. And because I'm physically here in the same town, it will be hard for me to make that emotional separation. So most market managers don't do what I've done. I mean, obviously I'm just an aberration in many, many respects. Most people go on and have a whole career. Maybe it's in the food system somewhere, but they go and do something different, or maybe go to a different market.
Yeah, I think in talking with Rebecca through this process, it sounds like, yeah, she does feel a lot of response. She noticed the whole, like, she doesn't have a employee handbook to pass on, so she wants to create one for that next person. And I think it's important in this transition process to know that, like, every step you are able to, the things you are able to do to pass on are fine. You don't have, if you notice your market doesn't, this isn't a process of like, what are all the things wrong and the holes that we absolutely, that have to be changed so that we're the most ideal market. If all you can do is get a list of the passwords and make sure the keys are all in one spot, and you don't have to create things for the next person that you never had time to create for your market yourself. That is not your responsibility, but at least letting them know where the pieces are so that they can create stuff when they come in. It's just a helpful thing for people to have. But don't stress yourself out about it. Don't panic. Yeah.
Rachel's asking, how am I going to set boundaries and a timeline for transition? I I'm thinking about this, but I mean, we had to say a timeline in order for me to work with a consultant under this grant. And so I'm not bound, I don't feel like I'm bound by that timeline, but it would be that I work all of this year, that, you know, if we could figure out what the positions are and advertise them in the fall, and then I would transition people next season. I mean, that's a scenario. But I think there's a real decision to be made. I think this doesn't really affect other people so much because typically the person does not hang around. And, you know, we need to look at this from my successor's viewpoint too. How hard is it to have that person hanging around, that you feel like they're judging you? And also, you know, the vendors, you know, the vendors who have a gripe about anything are going to try to blame it on the transition kind of thing. There's going to be some disadvantages to having the person hanging around afterward, as well as the advantage of that, you know, maybe, you know, I think I was saying to Amanda that maybe my role in the future will be that I can sub and run the market booth and do SNAP transactions, something that's not a policy thing. And that's just because I know it's hard to get people who up to speed to do that quickly. But then, you know, then maybe they would get somebody trained as a backup. It's just hard to back up market positions, period. Because they're just weird. They're, you know, 4 hours on a Saturday or something like that.
Can you tell
Okay.
us what consultant you used?
Help me,
was it?
Amanda, what was her name?
Uh,
Debbie?
Diana or Debbie. I can
Debbie?
look it up.
She has a name that's very similar to one of my, a publication that we advertise in. So I'm having a blank out on her last name. She's one of the contractors with the Nonprofit Association of Oregon, and it's a resource I should have put in the slides. NAO. We have joined NAO. They are the ones that used to put out a nonprofit, sort of the nonprofit Bible that we, in the old days, we all used to create our organizations with. We're waiting for the 6th edition of that Bible to come out. It's called the Oregon Nonprofit Handbook, and it was due a year ago. And hopefully it will come out someday.
Her name is Deborah Dunn from Synergy Resources Group.
Thank you.
I'm sure you can Google that. I don't have her.
Yeah, and I forget whether she's based in Portland or Eugene. But we met by Zoom, and she had an assistant who participated in all the calls. And, you know, I don't blame her for it not being done in the right order. I just took the opportunity to use the grant funds for consulting without being really ready to do it in a way that would have been a better order for myself. So, and her name is literally one letter away from the publisher. That's why I have this existential freak out every time I have to say her last name.
And what exactly did they do for you?
Well, as I alluded to, it started with this very large checklist of things, and that's what I don't think was mentally healthy for me, to look at this huge checklist. I would recommend that you yourself look at the Washington State Farmers Market Association checklist, because that one that's refined to farmers market needs. And even though there are going to be some things in there that you don't need, I think that's going to be, even though it's a large universe, I think it's going to be a more suitable universe. And so I would start with that, and then ask experts' help on things that you or your board want to work on, and not be as concerned entire universe of things that other nonprofits might have and do.
Thank you.
Yeah, can
And
anybody speak to anything that when they came on, whether on purpose or by accident, that you were given that was really helpful for you? I mean, did people get a list of passwords? Did you sit down for the first day and like not know how to get into your computer? How much help did you get?
I got a master calendar with annual tasks, and that was really helpful. Instead of just getting like a list of all the tasks that you would have to do in a year, the fact that they were grouped under each month was really helpful.
yeah, I'm thinking that using a spreadsheet may be the way for me to create my document so that it can be sorted a couple different ways. Because I can see a use for the chronological, and I can also see a use for the subject matter organization. And perhaps the person coming on will use more than the other, but my brain wants to know what are all the things that might be done to the website in a year's time, all in one place, rather than just finding it sprinkled among the months. But it might be good both places, or both. But maybe it's the same document, just sort it and save it two different ways. I've always had a document I call the winter duty checklist. Because back when didn't have anything to do with running the winter market, there was a lot more downtime to work on things, and I could space them out carefully and just look at this checklist as I'm doing them. But now I have the problem of like closing out the winter market at the same time I'm trying to ramp up the regular season. And that little document isn't up to the task anymore. Rachel mentions she feels that a month of overlap has probably been to her the sweet spot. We haven't talked about that, but the board, that was a board question because it's a financial question. If you have a market, you're paying for two people for that length of time. But I think whatever you can fund that suits your needs is money well spent. I haven't been through it yet, but it seems to me that would be money well spent. You just have to know about it and budget for it. So who's a great way of passwords are a security issue. I guess I'm just going to make a spreadsheet. I don't think I want to make it a Google spreadsheet. Maybe I'm just being old-fashioned and weird about it, but that seems like one thing I don't necessarily want to put on Google. But we all have stuff up on Google that if it got loose, it would be a big problem. Does anybody have an idea about how to best communicate all the passwords?
We've always just had a Word doc saved on one computer with logins, and it's not useful if you're not in the office on that computer. So, if you're in there, it's fine, but if you're trying to access something from somewhere else and somebody's not there to open up the Word doc, then it doesn't work.
Well, if it's a laptop and it's with one of you, then that person can text the other and say, yeah, here's how you break into that. Password manager.
Yeah.
So you have one password. you have one password to the password manager, and then you can get into that. But if you lose the password manager password, you are screwed. But still, I think that is a recommended. Okay, so Ashley, I think I think I agree with the IT pro that, you know, Google has not had many public problems, and we trust it with a lot of information. I mean, I've chosen to, you know, make our whole make our whole FMF, for example, all that stuff. I can't imagine having that on the having that in my laptop primarily anymore. It's anything that you need, anything that two staff members need to work on, you know, pretty much needs to be up there somehow. And
And
you Windows people use OneNote, I guess. I don't love OneNote, but it's what Windows provides.
another thing with passwords or gaining access to accounts, seems like the last few transitions we've had here at OFMA have involved like an hour where the new person and the former person are together, and there's logging into the account, getting the code that goes to somebody's cell phone, and then being able to pass that code on so that someone can get into the account and then change everything over so it goes to the new person's phone. And just planning in a transition where you're able to plan the transition, being able to plan that hour where you just log into accounts together and do, if you have that two-factor stuff going on with a lot of your accounts, like going through those.
I can't imagine that there is any market that wouldn't have to do that, some of that stuff. If you use QuickBooks, for example, if you have QuickBooks for your accounting solution, you're definitely going to have to do that. I would allocate more than an hour. I just think there's so many sites now that have two-factor that, and maybe that's the thing to note was as you're building up your list of things to share, try to note whether two-factor is required and whether it's text or email at this time. Maybe, you know, maybe changing some of the two-factor to email would be a good idea for the transition. I guess I prefer text for mine normally, but maybe I'll want to do some more email two-factor instead. Does everybody know what we're talking about here? This is when it says we're sending a code to your text or your email, and you have to produce it within a couple minutes, 24 hours, or whatever their time is, and the code dies. And that's what's required to get in there. And if you're not in there, then you can't change anything. So that is the essential part of handoff.
We have about 8 minutes left, and I want to make sure if anybody has a question that they haven't gotten to get in there or an idea that they haven't gotten to share, if there's anyone who hasn't talked much yet, that they get to put something out.
Well, I wasn't necessarily thinking this is a help session for me, but in some ways it has. So I really appreciate people sharing stuff because this is a work in progress for me. And I look forward to using the resources that we've provided and getting it to a stage where I feel that it's a document worth showing my board to begin with even.
Rebecca, I know that we're already losing you. You are transitioning. That's why you're here. But I hope none of the other people here are leaving anytime soon. I hope it's not indicating anything.
Well,
You never know.
I think that I think probably have been through the worst in terms of the pandemic and post-pandemic changes, but the nature of nonprofit work is always changing. And the majority of our markets are nonprofits, and the fortitude of the markets that have just one person who is a site manager and the board members are all volunteers. We have to really thank them for keeping all these markets going in the last few years. Under some difficult circumstances, there were markets that had to move during the pandemic, and a couple markets were delayed from opening, not many, fortunately. So I feel like we're in a slightly better place than that, but the nonprofit world has been forever altered by the last couple of years.
So true, Rebecca. A lot of transition, a lot of change has happened in the last few years. And
unfortunately, OFMA as a nonprofit, even though it was going through, it was dealing with all the same what's the word? Well, the same waves of stuff. OFMA was there for us the whole time, and even with a staff transition at OFMA too. So I really appreciate that that we kept each other, together and moving in a forward direction of one sort or another during all that.
yeah, thank you. This is a great network, and I'm glad to see you guys here together to help each other. And I hope when you are done with getting your transition packet ready to go, Rebecca, maybe you can share that with the group too, or you'd have to
well, yeah, I'll have to heavily redact
but maybe the list of things that you included is something we could capture later too.
Yeah, I'm willing to do. I apologize if I feel like I'm always cautious about sharing things, partly because I'm just embarrassed that they look kind of unfinished or something. But if you share something in the spirit of this, I hope this will get you going, and you'll be able to build on it and do better. Then it's a good thing.
Yeah, and this has already been super helpful for everyone.
Yes.
Well, just learning about for me, learning about the statewide resources, other people have obviously been dealing with this problem for a long time, and are in a have been in a position to create some kind of a template for us. That is just a thing. And I really intend to use those resources myself to go shopping for, what my document needs to contain.
We've done great work. Thanks for sharing this session with us and sharing your ideas, Rebecca. Thanks for your time. We really appreciate you.
Thanks for your help with this. It was harder, as she said, because the emotional part of it that complicates it a little bit, and that it helped to have someone to work with on this.
Yeah.
All right.
Great to see all of you today. We'll see you at the next one coming up in about a month, and we have a peer learning circle next week, and we have a mental health crisis training on Monday. So see you all guys soon.